As Flora had pointed out during our intro, today marks the 21st anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. And I was thinking about this as I was writing our message for this morning. 21 years since the 9/11 attacks. 21 years. And yet, for so many people around the world, it still feels like just yesterday. The wounds still feel fresh. It's a day that will be remembered all across the world, especially in our country. And for so many people, it was a day of fear and panic. It was a day of worry and confusion. One of those days when you remember where you were when you found out the news. I remember being a first grader that year, 2001, and there was this sense of lostness. There was this sense of people trying to figure out what happened, trying to comprehend everything, trying to make sense of everything. And the truth is, there was no way of making sense of this tragedy. And even all these years later, many of us still find ourselves confused, lamenting, still find ourselves hurt and asking God why this happened. In so many ways, our lostness still isn't over, even 21 years later. We still have questions. We still remember the images of people losing their lives on national TV. We still feel the effects. We still recall the long list of names. We are still lost. And today I want to share with all of you that being lost is a big part of our relationship with God. And if this week's gospel reading has anything to say about it, this is exactly as it should be. As Luke sets the scene, Jesus is in trouble once again for hanging out with the wrong people. As tax collectors and sinners come to listen to him, the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious folks, begin to grumble. They can't believe that this guy who is claiming to be the Son of God is hanging around and eating with these dirty people, with these neglected people, with these types of people. And so Jesus responds to these harsh, religious, church-going folks with two parables. The first one is the parable about the the shepherd who leaves 99 sheep behind to look for a single one that is lost. He searches night and day until he finds it. And when he does, he carries that one lamb home on his shoulders. He invites his friends and neighbors over, and he throws this big party to celebrate. In the second parable, a woman loses one of her 10 silver coins, and right away she lights a lamp. She sweeps her entire house, looking carefully, searching for that coin until she finds it. And when she does, just like the shepherd, she calls together her friends and neighbors, throws a big party, and it says that she rejoices. She tells her friends, "Come over, rejoice with me, because I have found the coin that I once lost." And when I read our passage this week, it kind of dawned on me how I've been reading this passage a certain way for so many years. For some reason, I always thought that the lost sheep, I always thought that the lost coin represented sinners out there. People who were beyond the fold. People who didn't belong to the church. People who didn't belong to God. That they represented the outsiders, the people who were never a part of this, were never a part of it, and were always far removed. But as I read our passage again and again this week, I realized that the lost sheep in the first parable already belongs to the shepherd's flock from the very beginning of the story. It's his lamb. I realized that the lost coin in the second parable already belongs to the woman before she loses it. The coin is one of her own coins. And that's when it hit me that these parables, maybe, as we're reading it, are not so much about lost outsiders finding their way in. These parables are about us, the insiders, the churchgoers, the bread and wine consumers, the Bible readers. These parables are about lost people who are already in the fold. Because lostness isn't an experience that only happens to non-Christians. Lostness also happens to God's people. It also happens with all of us believers. We get lost and then found and lost again over and over on this journey of faith. We get lost and found and lost again over and over on this journey of life. It's not like once we're saved, we never become scared. It's not like once we're saved, we never have to worry again. We get lost over and over again, and somehow, some way, God finds us over and over again. Almost as if lostness is part of the life of faith. I mean, we're all here in worship this morning. We all testify to the goodness and grace of God that has worked miracles in our lives. But I'm sure for all of us, there's been moments when we felt lost, when we lost our sense of belonging, when we lost trust, when we lost touch with God's presence. We lost the strength to persevere through trials in our lives. Some of us get lost when our bodies begin aching and God's goodness starts to look not so good. Some of us get lost when death comes too soon and too suddenly for someone we love, and we experience a crisis of faith that leaves us reeling. Some of us get lost when a relationship that we cherish so much comes to an end, when plans fail, when dreams fade away, when we worked so hard for something and still things don't end up the way that we want them to. Some of us get lost when our children break our hearts. Some of us get lost in the temptation of lust and unforgiving and hatred and bitterness. Some of us might be lost right here within the very walls of this church, and prayer has lost its meaning. The scriptures we once loved no longer hit like they used to. When sitting in the pew on a Sunday morning takes up more of our free time than we want. When even the most well-intentioned sermon becomes boring, and the table of bread and wine that once nourished us now leaves us hungry, cranky, or bored even. Even as Christians, we get lost. And we get so miserably lost that the shepherd has to wander through the thick wilderness to find us. We get so wholly lost that the housewife has to light her lamp, pick up her broom, and sweep out every nook and cranny of her house to discover what's become of us. We get lost over and over again. And God always comes looking for us. I shared this once a few months ago while I was getting ready for a sermon about sheep. I don't know if anybody remembers, we were talking about sheep for like an hour in one of our sermons. But one of the things that I found out in my preparation was that that the vision that sheep have is very unusual. It's nothing like our human vision. It's nothing like the way that we humans see things. Sheep are unique in that they can see what's behind them without ever turning their heads. And so they don't have to turn around. They can already notice what's behind them. There's something about the shape of their pupils that helps them do this. But there's also a catch. They can see what's behind them, but they have a hard time seeing what's right in front of them. So even though they can see what's behind them without turning their heads, they have a hard time seeing the way forward. So to help them find their way, it's crucial for these sheep to listen to the shepherd's voice. They need to hear that voice. Without it, they're stuck. They don't know the way forward. And they start wandering, and eventually they get lost. They're animals that get lost very easily. Their shepherd, in this way, is their eyes forward. The shepherd gives them the vision that they need. The shepherd gives them that direction that they need. The shepherd is the one that gives them their sight. And I was thinking maybe that's why Jesus likes to use sheep as an example so much in his teachings. Not just because people at that time knew sheep very well, but also because sheep get lost easily. And they can't find their way on their own. And they can't see what's in front of them. They can see the past, but they struggle to see the future. And so they depend on their shepherd more than any other animal to guide them through life. Maybe Jesus knew that we are just like sheep, that we get scared when things go wrong or when change and discomfort comes. Maybe Jesus knew that we have trouble seeing what tomorrow or next month or next year will bring. And like sheep, we want someone to help lead us in these times of fear and uncertainty. And today, Jesus reassures us that when we feel lost, that when we feel like there's no hope, that all of our efforts have been wasted, when we feel like we're all alone and there's no way forward, Jesus reassures us that God searches, that God persists, that God lingers and God plods, that God wanders over hills and valleys looking for his sheep, that God turns the entire house upside down looking for that lost coin. And when at last God finds what God is looking for, God cannot contain the joy that wells up inside. And so God invites the whole neighborhood over, shares the happy news of recovery, and throws a party to end all parties. That is the good news we celebrate today, church. That even in our times of loss, when we are scared and cannot see the way forward, God the searcher, God the seeker, God the determined finder comes to look for us and helps us open our eyes and see that we are not alone, that we have not been forsaken, that we have not been rejected. Opens our eyes to see that we have not been pushed out, that we have not been cursed or deemed to suffer, that our efforts have not been wasted, that our prayers have not been ignored. We see the truth in this now more than ever. So much has changed lately, and for many of us, our future seems so uncertain. We can't see the road ahead. We can't even make any plans for next month because we're not really sure how things will work out this month or how our situation in our lives will play out. Some of us might be needing someone to depend on. Maybe the load is too heavy to carry alone. Maybe you're stressed out and you feel like you have no one to talk to. I'm sure that we all fall into one of these categories, maybe even all of them. And today, Jesus comes and reminds us of whose we are. We are sheep of the Good Shepherd who comes to us sitting in our lostness, begging for healing. And he doesn't just walk past us like our lives have no value, like our pain and worry is meaningless to him. But he desperately comes looking for us and stops at nothing until he finds us in our lostness and despair. It amazes me that God believes that each and every one of us is worth looking for, that I'm not expandable, that I'm loved enough and desired enough for God to search after in the hills and the valleys. It amazes me that God loves each of us so much that he won't give up looking for us in our lostness and our despair. That God looks for each of us even when we can't find ourselves. And that God would feel so much joy at our recovery that he'll tell the whole world the good news and throw all of us a party. It reminds me of one preacher that said, what you seek is seeking you. What you seek is seeking you. That is true, and this is grace. But maybe it's even truer that what I can't or won't seek is still seeking me. That God looks for us when our lostness is so strong and so profound, we can't even pretend to look for God. But God still looks. That even in the bleak and hopeless place, God finds us. This is amazing grace, and it is all ours through the love and the mercy and the grace of God. Amen.